Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 7 of my 2022 Valentine Card Series. Today I'm going to be using the Sunny Studio Passionate Penguins stamp set. So I've stamped the images I'll be using on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. For my sweet little penguins, I'm going to use T3, T5, and T7. So I'm starting with that T7 and laying in some shadows on this sweet little penguin girl first. So the shadows on an image like this can be a bit tricky because that umbrella would be casting them in a pretty deep shadow, but I wanted them to look dynamic, especially since they're black images. I wanted, there's to still be some shading on there. So I'm just using a little bit of creative license and adding it where I think it should go. I left the top of her head to have a little highlight, also the sides of her bodies. I put a shadow in the crease of her little flippers since they're kind of curved up there as well, and put the highlight on the bottom edges. And then for the little boy penguin, I'm going to color him the same with the same shades, but the shading will be just a little bit different since he's facing toward the side, but I'm putting it in the same basic places. So at the bottom of his head, kind of to separate that from the rest of his body. I put a little bit on the bridge of the nose to kind of just push that out a bit. And then also on the underside of his little flippers, including the one that is holding that umbrella. So there's not a lot of space there on that one. And then at the bottom of his body as well. And then I filled in his flipper that's holding the umbrella with the T5. So it's just the darkest two shades there, because there was no way that any light would be getting over there. But I did give him a little bit of a highlight at the top of his head and the top of his flipper, and toward the little sides of his body where his little love handles would be, I guess. And then for the whites of the penguin, I decided to go with something that would just warm them up a bit. So I used E40 and E41. I've recently discovered these shades for polar bears and really liked it. So I thought it would work well for the whites of my penguins as well. It just kind of just brings them a little bit more to life than using like another lighter shade of gray. I really like the way that it turns out, especially once I get the blush on there and everything. So I'm going to do R000, R11, and R20 for their rosy cheeks. So I did the R20 first and then went around that with the R11. And then to really soften that up, I went around it with the R000 as well. And I think that turned out really nice on these, especially because they're pale. I don't always use that R000, but on the white, the R11 even can be too much. So then I'm taking away that R000 and adding in the R22, and I'm going to do the little girl penguin's hair bow. I put the R22 where the fabric is gathered, and then put the highlight on the outer edges for that. And I did go back in and deepen those shadows a bit more. And then for their beaks and feet, I used YR04 and YR07. I did a little YR07 first, and then I'm going to blend that out with the YR04. And I felt like the areas were small enough that just 2 shades was enough. And then I'm going to do the umbrella. I decided not to do it multicolored for today. I wanted to just have a red umbrella, and I went with R24, R29, and R39. I wanted to keep the color palette pretty simple because the background is just going to be 2 shades as well. So I just wanted everything to tie in really nicely, and for the penguins themselves to really pop, because they're actually the most colorful images, even though they're black and white, but they've got, the rosy cheeks and the orange beaks and feet, so they actually will stand out the most, which is what I wanted. So I did my shadows on the umbrella with the R39 and put that in all the creases, and also put a little shadow up on the underside of the umbrella. And then I blended that out with the R29, and then I'm going to fill in with the R24, which is going to really make things pop. Just making sure to really work over the edge of that R29 and pull that into this lightest shade so that I get a nice smooth blend and you don't see those harsh lines that I'm always talking about. For the metal rod, I wanted a different gray than the penguins. I went with W3. And then for the handle, I wanted that to be brown, so I went with E44. And then I'm going to trim these images out with their matching die. For the background, I'm going to take one of the Lawn Fawn stitched circle stackables and die cut that out of another piece of Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock. And then I'm going to take a few of the little hearts in this stamp set, and I'm going to stamp them directly onto the background. Since there are no dies for the little hearts, I thought I would just stamp them directly and color them on that. And I'm going to do the little hearts instead of raindrops, just to kind of emphasize the feeling of love there. For my sentiment, I'm going to heat emboss onto a piece of Lawn Fawn chili pepper cardstock, and I used my Rabbit Hole Designs embossing powder tool for the very first time, and I really liked the way it worked. I'm going to ink up the sentiment that I created using Versamark ink. It's just a clear sticky ink that grabs a hold of your embossing powder and holds it in place while you heat set it. So I put together the sentiment that says, "I flippin' love you." Those are all separate words, so you can kind of build your own sentiment there. But this is the one that I decided to go with. So I'm going to coat that with some white embossing powder, and I was having trouble getting it completely to coat one of the P's, but I'll fix that in a little bit there. I'm going to heat that up with my heat tool. I just let it get hot off to the side and then bring it to the back and then the front until everything is completely melted. And then I let that completely cool down before I do anything else, because I don't want to smear that embossing powder while it's still hot. So I let that dry, and then I grabbed a microfiber cloth. This one is from Pink and Maine, and just brush that off to remove any of that excess powder. And then I'm going to take a white gel pen, and I'm going to just go over the couple little places that I felt like the embossing powder didn't coat completely, and that really works so well. So there's a tip for you guys if you ever have that issue. Then I'm going to stamp on the inside of my card. I'm using Lawn Fawn Guava cardstock and Lobster ink. And I picked two more of the penguins and a couple little hearts and put together this sentiment that says, "You're the coolest." And I did stamp that down a couple of times to make sure it was nice and bold, because this ink does dry back and I wanted it to really stand out. And then I'm taking the Sunny Studio Bursting Hearts die. I'm going to die cut that out of another piece of chili pepper cardstock. And I had to bring it over because I didn't want all those hearts going all over my craft room. So I brought the whole thing over to my desk, and I'm just going to remove all of those little hearts. If you don't want to take the time to pop them out one at a time by hand, you can use a tool for this. I have this one here from Spellbinders. I'll link it down below. But you just basically rub it over the back of your die, and then all the little bits pop out. This one has a lot of little bits, so it did take a couple of goes at that. Once you've done that, you can just like run your fingernail over them and they'll just pop out super easy. So it really does come in handy. You could also save all of those little hearts, just put them in like a little container or a little Ziploc bag or something like that, and use them as embellishments on other projects. I think that would be so fun because you get so many different sizes out of this one die. All you have to do is pass it through one time and you've got all of these little bits. So yeah, definitely hang on to those if you are somebody who likes to use little heart embellishments. So now I'm ready to adhere that to my card front. So I'm going to use my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue because there's not a lot of space to add the glue, and I want to make sure that it is really well adhered down. So I'm going to go around and just find little places where I can add dots, especially to all the outside edges and the center. But even once I do that, I'm going to try to pick a few little extra places here and there just to make sure that it's really well pressed down to the card front so you really get the effect that this die creates. So once I have enough glue on there, I'm just going to line that up over my card front, make sure that it's on there nice and straight so all of the edges really match up with the card base. And then once I'm sure that I have it in position, I'm going to just hold that down and smooth it into place until that glue dries. It dries really fast. And wow, what a stunning effect that die creates. So now I'm going to move back to my focal panel. I wanted to put a little bit of color behind the images, but because I wanted to color in the hearts, I used the Spectrum Noir cardstock, and the Distress inks don't blend that well on it. They work better on Bristol. So I decided to just use my Copics, and I went with R000 once again. So I'm just kind of doing a blob in the middle, and then I'll bring my images and kind of see how that looked. It wasn't wide enough. You couldn't really see it around them. So I'm just going to extend that out. And like I said, I wanted it to look more organic, so I'm not making a perfect circle. I'm purposely, making little bumps here and there and stuff to just make it more replicate like the look of an ink blended background. So I just went back and forth testing it to see how much I needed to add there until I had a look that I liked and that, it was far enough extended that you would see it around the image. And then I'm going to color in all of the little hearts. I'm starting with R22 and just coloring them in on the right hand side, so they'll have a bit of shading there. And then I'll use the R20 for the other half, so it'll have a nice highlight. And I just kept them all the same so that they would, all have the same light source kind of. So once those are done, I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of this focal panel, and I will pop that up in the center of my card. And it's pretty easy to line up because you can make sure that all of the hearts in the row that you're doing line up the same. So I just moved it until I had, like a perfect placement, and then press that down into place. And then I die cut my sentiment with a Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiment Banner. I just selectively die cut it because the full length of it would have been too long. So I just shifted it in my die cut machine until I had it equal on both sides. And then I'm going to adhere my adorable little penguins in the center of that focal panel. And I will add that sentiment kind of at the bottom to give them a little bit of ground to stand on. So just going to adhere that with some more of that liquid glue. Hold that in place until everything is pressed down securely. And then of course I wanted to add a little bit of glitter, so I'm going to add some Stardust Stickles. I'm adding that to the right side of each of the hearts, right where I did my darkest shading. And then I wanted to tie it in one more place, so I decided to add it to the girl penguin's little hair bow. And that is going to finish this one up, so I will lift that up to the camera so you can see all of that detail. I really love how this one turned out. I think that die is just absolutely gorgeous, and I love those sweet little penguins. So there's another peek at the inside. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to hit that like button. It helps so much if you engage with the video for the YouTube algorithm. So give it a like, leave me a comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell. All of that stuff helps so much. If you're interested in any of the products, I'll have everything listed and linked in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is 2 extra videos from previous years of Valentine Card Series. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.